Hi, Dave here, and today we're going to check out the work of Rusin Gao. He is a freelance concept artist based in Hangzhou, China. He doesn't have a lot of social media sites. He does have an Instagram, and I did find this one interview of him or with him by this podcast called The Evil Jar. It's kind of like a concept art type of podcast. They haven't posted in years, but I will still link the video in the description below. And although when it comes to Rusin Gao's process, I haven't really found a video of his personal kind of painting approach. But in his ArtStation portfolio, I did find two posts where he kind of describes his step-by-step kind of approach. And to me, that's kind of enough. You don't always have or need a video. And thankfully, they're kind of clear enough for you to understand, right? And you can just kind of tell his approach by just seeing his actual shots or his screenshots. He does have a few characters in his portfolio. However, based on the amount or based on the majority, he does focus more on his own environment types of concepts. And I've noticed that he's pretty dynamic, not very boring in terms of his shapes, because sometimes when you put in if you do have a lot of design in your shot, you kind of have to tone down the the perspective shot, right? Just because it's going to take too much work, I guess, and you kind of want to balance things out and be more efficient. And so I've noticed that Mr. Gao here, he likes to kind of simplify the environments, but he kind of compensates that with the composition. I would recommend the work, or through his composition, I would recommend the work of John Park and Jordan Grimmer. Both of them, they do know how to focus more on the composition and less on the design. I mean, it's kind of hard to not work on the design, because eventually you will have to kind of design the environment, no shit, right? But you can also design the composition, right? Like the way the shot is kind of handled. And I think you need to be aware of which one should be more focused on. Fuck. Awesome clouds. You can actually see a bit of yellows and greens coming from the actual water below. So it does kind of fit in together. And again, it does have that complementary thing going on. The greens and the reds, right? Think Christmas. Here's another example of his basic or standard 2D painting. I mean, I'm not saying it's low quality. What I'm saying is he can paint with just Photoshop, and he doesn't have to use photos. Although you will see later on in his more recent work, he does know how to use photo bashing pretty well. He does know how to apply the right textures, and I've seen him use Blender as well for some of his work. Although I do find his 2D paintings way more attractive, just because there's more painting. Even if it does have a bit of photo textures in it, some photo bashing, it still looks kind of unique. And he does have a very unique style, I would say. And I often find his work in the community tab on ArtStation, so that's pretty cool, right? Now this one is actually a pretty standard basic shot in terms of composition, but you can tell he knows how to paint. I actually do find his clouds here more interesting, just because there's a bit of chaos, I guess. Even if the shapes or the edges aren't too clear, I like seeing the kind of mixer. Maybe he did use the mixer brush for the clouds here, but it just looks more dynamic. The shape overall plus the edges aren't that clean. Yeah. Now this one, even though it's kind of a standard shot, it's not too bad, just because you can see this diagonal thing going on here with the water, right? And even this kind of flower thing, it looks pretty nice, right? And there's definitely way more contrast in this flower thing, right? Some darks, some highlights here, or the light side of these petals here. And some folks here with some birds to kind of indicate some sense of scale, right? And I can actually see a few grass brushes here, the default Photoshop grass brushes. Although it's not overused, right? He did paint most of it anyway, so it's not too bad. And yeah, his work does have an oily kind of look. I would put him also in the category of Derek Zabrocki. Both of them do have that sense of natural thickness. Ooh, yeah, kind of like an oil-like thickness. Not a gouache type of look, but a more oily, thick look, right? Anyway. Now this one, this plant thing is pretty interesting. He does like hooded figures, so that's kind of cheating for me. But again, there's this nice complementary thing going on. The reds and the kind of greens, right? Not a lot of, maybe a bit of like photo textures here for the mountain thing. And maybe for the branches perhaps. But most of it is painted. And again, if you just focus on the big picture, you can see he's very graphic with the shapes. And I've seen him actually do a few like grayscale paintings in the beginning. You will see eventually. I will go through a few of them in this session. And he knows how to kind of add color, add photo textures after. So he's kind of like John Park as well. Because I've seen John Park also post his like basic grayscale paintings or sketches, and then he'll add some colors and textures. And there's obviously both of them, both Rusin Gao and John Park, obviously have their systems in place, right? But then again, Ruxing Gao doesn't have like a lot of videos, so you're going to have to just check out his ArtStation portfolio and see the posts where he does have his step-by-step kind of process. This one does have way more photos in it, right? You can tell some photo bashing, and it actually does feel like an Avatar, or it's like it's part of the Avatar world by James Cameron, right? Just because of the blues, the blue-greens, very, very cool image. In terms of the temperature, at least. I mean, it's also cool because it's concept art, but it's a very, very natural looking, right? Okay, we have a whale. Maybe he did just a photo. Hard to say, but I do think he did paint it. Now the environment itself is pretty standard. The only thing that really kind of makes it pop is the shot of this whale plus the kind of lighting. There is something coming from this side, maybe the sun or some kind of light source, maybe some kind of magical thing or entity, right? But I love seeing this kind of reflected light here and this second fin or in this top fin coming from the reddish kind of environment, so that's pretty cool. And notice the whale is actually white, no shit. And so you have to be kind of careful with how many colors you want to implant on it, because nothing will be fully white, especially if it's in an environment. So how do you balance that? I do see a few purples in it, like a few pinks, a few purples, maybe some slight yellows. It does have like slight hue variety in it, even in this area right here. But it's so faint. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure he did kind of layer these rocks as well, just because of the edges. You can tell if something is too clean in the edge, he probably, or the artist probably layered it just to be extra safe. And especially if you're doing like an environment, it's going to be usually way more complicated and will have more like elements in it, so you have to be a bit more planned out, I guess, right? Now this one does have a hippo with some horns in the back, so it's kind of like a god hippo. And I see a lot. Oh, this one does feel more like a full-on illustration. This could be like a print even, or a book cover, right? I love the waves, very greenish. The worms are in the teeth, the yellows, you can tell. I'm not sure if there's a bigger wave in the back. You can tell this beast is maybe being awakened or being kind of captured. I see a lot of ropes, so very, very kinky. Bondage. Yes. And I like seeing that slight hue variety, especially like in these like white stuff. The waves essentially when water when water moves, it does have it does make this kind of white thing, right? Oh shit, bubbles, I guess. But you can see here there's a bit of red in it, right? I wouldn't actually expect to see like warm colors in like water, but you can add them. although they are quite minimal. Even in the throat of this kind of hippo, you can see a bit of like purple or violet red in it. But this one's pretty high quality, and it's actually very, very intimidating. Maybe they just a photo bashing here with this kind of texture of this kind of splatter, water splatter thingy. But fuck, it looks pretty epic, right? Anyway, ooh. Oh, you can tell this is obviously a photo, right? And I believe it's being consumed by some kind of cloud, right? Or snow, or maybe this is like snow or something. I do think these are clouds, and maybe something is being elevated or something. I said something twice. It feels like a UFO of some kind. If you focus on the clouds, they do have their own shapes. Obviously, it's not natural to see these sort of clouds, but it can add to the composition of the piece. You can use water, clouds, and such to kind of, even mountains, to kind of play with the composition. And just by playing with the composition, you're actually adding a bit to the design of the piece. So, to the overall design at least. So it can make your work a bit more interesting. And even though it's mostly like a green versus blue, you can see a few reds in it, a few oranges, right? A few warm tones, especially here in this area where it's mostly being hit by light. So it's mostly on the cooler side of the temperature spectrum. And again, I like the kind of thick look. You can see a bit of that grittiness in the kind of edges, in the clouds especially. And I'm not sure if he likes to use the mixer brush a lot. But I do see that kind of fade out effect, especially in the clouds. Now this shot is actually kind of simple, pretty standard, not super dynamic. I mean, it's pretty interesting, but it's not like his usual landscape kind of shot that's kind of tilted. But here you can already see his kind of blending expertise, where he mixes photo bashing with some painting to the point where it's kind of hard to tell which one is which. I'd also recommend the work of Yang Qi or Qi Yang, because he when he does his environment, he's mostly a character artist, but whenever he does his environments, you can see this kind of nice blend between a gritty kind of painting plus photo bashing. So, and it's so interesting how people can kind of add these sorts of soft atmospheric clouds. I'm pretty sure they have to paint these and not use a cloud brush. So maybe they have to put it in their own layer, I guess. Because notice in the previous image, the clouds are pretty thick, right? It's almost like it's its own thing. But for this one, it's kind of like a smoke. It has a bit of transparency in it. So I'm not sure if it's using a cloud brush, a photo PNG, hard to say. Again, the birds to indicate scale. And of course the hooded figures, just because, yeah. And he's also pretty good with the leveling, or with using the levels adjustment layer. It helps to kind of make things more realistic and less stylized, I guess. And even the way he does his lighting, he knows how to put in those soft kind of shadows, those big overall shadows, where you have like a soft edge. It really does help make the piece look way more, or look bigger, right? Adds a bit more atmosphere. Again, the hooded figure with birds. I'm seeing a pattern. Again, it's a nice blending of photo bashing with a bit of painting, right? And photos really do help with like the textures. It just saves time. You don't have to paint everything, right? Here you can obviously tell the textures are in this area. This one's obviously going to be the area of focus, since it has way more contrast, it has the most light. And again, well, it's not a hooded figure, but he does have a robe, and the birds are always there. Nice ship. It feels like it's a photo, but it's hard to say. Nice shadow here, right? It looks very concept arty for me, or to me. And I do see a bit of noise, so maybe he did this after he was done painting. And again, you can see here in this kind of big rock, how he plays with the with the levels. It does become grayer further back. So you do have, especially when you're trying to make things look realistic, you have to learn how to play with the adjustment layers, especially with the leveling and the color balance, stuff like that. It will just help with the atmosphere. Now this one, I think it did add a bit of lens correction. The lens correction filter in Photoshop. It does give kind of gamey effect, or kind of cinematic look, or the 3D kind of gamey cinematic look. Yeah. Oh, so he did start up with a grayscale painting. Even his grayscale painting is already kind of cool. And then he does photo bash after. So he does decide beforehand how the composition will go, and he'll do it through an actual painting. He doesn't need the photos to kind of establish the painting. He'll just use it to save time, to kind of add textures and shit. I mean, look at this painting. It's already pretty much complete, right? Everything else is just kind of textures and colors. He did kind of enlarge the guy a bit more, right? Another grayscale painting, birds and a guy in a robe. I mean, look at the confidence. Oh, maybe he did use a few photos. Oh, he did use a few photos here, you can tell, right? But his painting is what's taking command, right? And look at how he paints. It's very bold, very strong, shapy types of strokes. That's very. It's not. He's not like John Walling-Liberto or Craig Mullins. He's more direct. Now this one does seem like a very basic painting. Ew. He did spend more time with this character right here. Although you'll notice he didn't really layer this image much, because you can tell by the edges they're kind of mixing. They're not that clean and cut. A bit of photo bashing here, or photo texturing. And you'll notice it's only in this area, because obviously this is the guy, the focus, and the things around him are going to be, or are going to have a bit more detail, right? Compared to, say, the foreground here and obviously the background. Even the clouds are kind of just done with the flat brush, or with the Reiki kind of brush, right? Another grayscale painting. A bit, you can tell photo bashing here to save time. It's a great way to kind of come up with concepts quickly. Right? This could have been a camel that he just kind of yeah, originally a camel, and he just kind of played with the proportions a bit to kind of make it look like an actual alien shit, or an antelope type of thing. Anyway, even the sky is, you know, photos. So now this one's pretty weird. The foreground, it's kind of like a weird shot for me, but it's not too bad. It's pretty interesting. And you can tell he did use a photo for this kind of rhino. And in the background, it does get simpler and simpler. And the trees are kind of like a PNG. Again, helps to save time, but he's already pretty good with painting anyway, so everything else is kind of just an additional kind of skill, right? Now this one, I think he did start with, oh yes, a grayscale painting, right? Anyway, sorry, with this grayscale painting, you can actually see a bit of photo textures for the mountain part. Or maybe custom shapes were used, hard to say. But you can tell in the background the glaciers and shit. The ice. He just fucking painted it, right? Maybe a bit of, oh shit, I don't think he did use photo textures. Maybe a little bit, but I mean, how did he bring this and turn it into this, right? Right? Fuck. And you can tell he did like use, you know, layering to kind of be more efficient, because it is a very complex environment, and it's pretty big. Like you can tell atmospherically it's kind of like a big environment. No shit, Dave. Photo. But again, it looks kind of well blended together. And it looks clean, even though it does have that oily kind of look, the very gritty, textured look, kind of like Derek Zabrocki. And you can see the same thing in Derek Zabrocki's work, where he does mix that oily kind of look with photo bashing. It does have that same kind of. It actually does mix well. I used to not like it, or I guess I used to not think it would work, but seeing Derek's work and obviously Rusin Gao's work, I'm starting to see the kind of appeal and how it can actually work. Oh yeah, also fuck, what's his name? He has a name. I think he's a fuck. Oh no, I'm forgetting his name, but yeah, a lot of artists are they're into the oily kind of look with the photo bashing and shit. But yeah, awesome piece. Very interesting, very clean again, even though it does have a gritty kind of look to it, right? Now how he colored it is, I don't really have the steps for you, so fuck. Now this one, maybe he did use a 3D kind of model. It does look big. The shadows do help. The soft kind of edge here makes it look way bigger. It's not exactly a kind of a clear-cut cast shadow. Right? This guy. And of course, the birds. Photo textures here. Nice blending. And nothing is out of place. It just feels right. And you can tell in the background, it just gets simpler and simpler. Less detail, less contrast. And even the way he handled the shadows in this area, even with this area, you can see a bit of that grayed outness that's usually done with the leveling adjustment layers. Even here in this bottom part, right? And it does help to, I guess, make that kind of leveling effect that will actually make your environment look more realistic. And I actually did learn this from, excuse me, sorry about that. I actually did learn this from Archie 9. I believe it's an Archie visualization channel, and essentially we do have the same kind of post-processing process when it comes to Photoshop. Yeah, the point is that you just have to learn how to use levels to kind of create this effect. Now this one is way more painterly. Less photos, hardly any photos, but it does have a very oily kind of look, right? And you can tell by the way he painted the trees and the clouds. It's so dynamic. It feels very pulled, kind of stretched out. Oof. And even the way he did like the branches, very, very simple. I do think he still layered his pieces here, or his environmental elements, just to be safe. But it looks right. Even in this mountain part here, the way he kind of balanced the rocks and the snow, it just has that sense of dynamicness to it. And you can see a bit of that hue variety in the clouds. You can see some greens, right? Now where is that coming from? Oh yeah, maybe the water is kind of icy, right? Bluish green. Although I would have expected a bit more like reds. I mean, you can see a bit of purple, I guess, so it kind of makes sense, but I did expect to see a bit more reds here, just a bit, like pink maybe. But yeah, it does feel like an oil painting to me. Oh, you can even see some greens here in the shadow parts, or in the areas in shadow. It's the same thing, bitch. Again, look at this shot. It's pretty simple, but look at how skewed it is, right? It's kind of pulled, right? It adds a bit of... It's almost like you're kind of zooming in and you're kind of moving in, right? You're kind of flying through the environment. Whoa! Interesting, but again, he did paint most of it. A bit of photo textures here, I can see it, but he's kind of in command. He is the boss, right? Now this one is mostly 2D painted. A bit of texture brushes here. And I often find this, sometimes people use texture brushes as their mixer brush. It does have an interesting kind of effect, right? Oh, it's a branchy kind of texture brush. But look at how thick that paint is. Very, very Derek Zabrocki-ish. Look at how well blended this thing is, right? It's a mix of photo bashing with some... Even the way he painted it is pretty clean, very graphical in nature. And the edges are super clear. Not a lot of mixer brush use. Moving on. Oh, look at that shot, right? Birds again. I believe this is a guy in a robe. Camels. Look at how well blended this thing is. It does have that realistic look. It's hard to see the painterliness of it, kind of like in this one and this one. This one is a bit more clean. The same thing goes for this guy. Like, it's more well blended, right? It's something you would expect to see on ArtStation in like a typical concept art kind of piece, because usually 2D paintings are done kind of behind the scenes. If ever you see a 2D painting, it's usually like a full-on illustration. This is kind of the standard, I guess, in everything, especially environment concept art, right? Fuck, am I right? Again, birds and a guy in a robe. Wonderful, wonderful painting. It's a blending of photo bashing and painting, right? And look at the amount of like spots here in terms of light. It's not just one big like light streak. That's what usually I would do. It's kind of all over the place. Like, there are so many kind of light spots in this painting that makes it look more... I guess it makes sense because if you check out the sky, it's a bit cloudy, so you'll probably see like some openings in the sky when, you know, you have like a very cloudy kind of day. And that idea is being reflected on the actual ground, right? Where not everything is in light. Most of it is in shadow, but you do get a bit of this diverse sense of light spots. Fuck, I think I believe he does have a breakdown of this piece. Okay, he did like a few sketches here, quick thumbnails, very, very heavy on the shapes. And then he picked this one in terms of the idea. Maybe he did mix a couple. He did like this idea, and I guess this is pretty reflected on this one. It's not all the way, but you can tell it kind of remained, like the gist of it is there. And then there you go. He did use a few photos, and maybe he did limit himself to these 4 photos, and then he used them to kind of just add in those specific textures. For this kind of building, he did add, or he did put in this building, or this archway from this photo here. For this architecture, he just implanted this guy onto here. I'm pretty sure he also got the building somewhere. It's kind of like it feels like a Muslim, a mosque perhaps, because you can tell by the dome shape, it's kind of like an Islamic kind of design. And then here for the landscapes, the greeneries, he did get even the rocks. Well, no, well, kind of. The rocks are from this guy and the greeneries are kind of from this guy, right? Or a mix of both, I guess. So yeah, it's actually pretty interesting to limit yourself to just a few photos, because I have this bad habit whenever I'm photo bashing to like, I'll download like hundreds of fucking photos and then I'll end up like painting nothing. Like, I'll usually start painting like days after and I'm like, oh my god, fuck Dave, focus. So maybe it is a good idea to kind of pick just a few like photos, 4 in this case, or maybe 3, right? Fuck. Oh yeah, this is the step-by-step process. Oh, by the way, R.I.P. Sean Connery. Fuck me. And I guess he did the same thing with his brushes. He doesn't have a lot of brush variety in his work like Craig Mullins, right? Or Li Xingyan. He's very, very opaque, so I guess he did limit himself to just 2 brushes here to kind of help blend the photos together. So yeah, you can see this nice progression. He did kind of do most of the photo bashing here, right? To kind of establish like the main shapes with the textures, and then he did kind of add these buildings here. He kind of removed this one, placed in a mountain instead. And then everything else is kind of like a refinement. Lots of paint overs, lots of adjustment layers. And you can tell this one does feel way, way more epic, right? Like the way he did the lighting is pretty top tier, right? Anyway, he actually could have stopped here and it would still look pretty cool. But there's obviously a difference between this guy and this guy, right? And again, it's nice that he did limit himself to just like 2 brushes. Help save time, less bullshit, and you actually get to focus on the actual painting, right? Look at those clouds, so graphic, right? I love the dinosaurs. Maybe he did use the smudge tool here to kind of drag paint around, but he often likes to put, later on, those kind of big shadows, so you can see the kind of soft gradients between dark and light, between the lit areas and the shadowed areas, right? Right. Even in this dinosaur, a part of it is in light and a part of it is in shadow. Very, very cool. Again, it does have that nice blending of the two, painting and photo bashing, right? And again, look at the shot. It looks pretty interesting. It's not a boring kind of standard piece. And I guess it's because most of it is kind of rock anyway, and there's hardly any design usually. It's really about more of the feeling of the place, right? Yeah. Because if you notice, for example, I think I reviewed Feng Yuan's work recently. Although he did characters, you'll notice that because he focuses a lot more on design, the shots have to be pretty simple. Even in Feng Zhu's work, the shots have to be simple. You're kind of wasting time by... you can always do the dynamic shots after the design phase, or kind of in the beginning to kind of just get the feel. And I do feel like Rusin Gao is more of the big picture kind of guy, right? Guy in a robe. Oh, not a lot of birds here, so maybe he was having a bad day. No birds. Oh, this one does have like a character in it. And again, it does have that nice gritty look to it. Now this one does have a bit more variety in it. Value variety, you can tell by the color dynamic setting, the apply per tip setting, and also hue variety is there. Very, very subtle, but it's there. And again, it does have that oily kind of look. And as you go further down, you can see more of the bigger brush strokes. And it does help to focus more on, or helps your eye to focus more on this area where the painting is a bit more refined, right? But again, he's a big picture kind of guy. Makes sense. Even in this portrait shot, it actually does look interesting. And I'm actually always, well, not always, but I'm often kind of scared to do portrait shots just because it's not a very common shot to work with. I usually go for like a 16:9 or any kind of cinematic landscape shot. It just makes sense. Even if I'm doing characters, I feel like I'm more doing portrait shots just feel more pressuring to me. Anyway, this one has way more detail, obviously with the photo texture thing. But it actually does look like an oil painting, right? It has a very thick look. This one does remind me a lot of Greg Rutkowski's work, because I've seen Greg use a lot, or the color dynamics kind of setting in his brushes a lot for his oil brushes, and it does feel like a palette knife was used. It does emulate that kind of palette knife kind of thing when doing traditional oil paintings. Like you can feel like the paint is being dragged around, right? So if you want to make your paintings look kind of thick, you can just turn on that color dynamic setting and kind of check the apply per tip setting in the color dynamics kind of setting in the brush settings. Whoa! Right? He does like let me just check. He does like reds and oranges a lot, right? If you kind of just skim through his portfolio, he does like the warmer reddish, orange, yellow kind of accent colors. They won't always be bright, but they're there, and they're very bold. Where were we? We were here. Come on, right? The way he did the background is pretty interesting. I'm not sure what this orange thing is. Maybe it's some kind of explosion. I feel like there's a sunset in the background, but then again, the sun is kind of on top here. It looks very abstract in a way, almost like a cubism painting. But you can see the photo bashing right here. The roofing, the kind of corrugated roofing with a bit of rust in it, right? And he did use that color dynamic setting for a few of the brush strokes. And it does give, I guess it's part of his painting style. It's not very common in his earlier works, but quite recently he's been developing, or is more like he has his own. His style is a bit more developed, I guess. Same thing for this guy. It's more of a study of this cow with a smaller cow. A calf? Fuck. A cowette. Again, it does have that palette look, palette knife kind of blending look, which can be achieved with the color dynamic setting with the apply per tip option turned on, right? And again, he does like the reddish, pinkish, warmer tone look, and he did kind of balance that strong saturatedness with the bluish greens in the foreground and a bit here in the background, just a bit. Everything else is kind of toned down in terms of saturation, I guess, because yeah, to kind of help this cow and this cowette or cowlet kind of pop out more, I guess. It almost looks, even though it looks kind of palette knife-ish, like an oil painting, palette knife painting, it does feel, because it's very heavy on the shapes, it does feel like a gouache painting at the same time, right? You can tell. Okay. Very, very heavy on the photo bashing here. But the blending is still top notch. I think it does have another step-by-step process here. Oh my gulay. Here it's basically a photo sketch, like a collage mashup essentially. And then maybe he did edit the colors in this stage to kind of get that warm look. Like he decided at this stage probably that he wanted that kind of warm look in general. And then he did, added more photos to kind of help figure out the scene a bit more. He did expand this area to this area, and then he added like smaller arcways within the bigger kind of arcway. And then he did adjust the colors in this third step. It's still in the warmer temperature, but he did add a bit more variation with the pinks and the yellows. And even here, even in this kind of building structure, this kind of architecture here, there's like a lot of color. So maybe the paint was being faded out or something. So it's kind of like an old ruin. And he finally just made extra adjustments. He did kind of tone down the pink red here on top. And that was kind of a nice choice, just because in step 3 and 4, like your eye is being pulled in this corner and it doesn't make sense. So he did kind of just leave it to kind of an orange, almost like a desaturated orange along with this area right here. It really helps your eye focus more on this architectural design, right? Moving on. Oh, this is actually not an environment. No shit. But he did include his kind of step-by-step approach. Grayscale painting. I think he did use a few photos for the drapery here, and then added more photos with a bit of paint overs. He did add the environment. So obviously he did have to separate the background from the actual foreground where the person is kind of standing at. And eventually kind of refined it along the way, and now it's this. So it's essentially the same process he would use for his environments. So it does show you the efficiency, I guess, or the reliability. Whoa, big word, reliability of his process. And it still looks kind of the same visually speaking, design-wise, as well as, and design-wise in terms of like the color, I guess. He does go back to like the reds and the warms, the yellows, right? And the way he blends, he's not very heavy on the brush variety. He's just simple. He does like the thick look in his work, a very oily kind of thick look. And he does know how to balance that with his photo bashing techniques, right? Now for this one, I do believe, I'm guessing he did use some 3D. Hard to say, or maybe just basic photo bashing. It feels like he just photo bashed this whole thing like a photo sketch in the beginning, or collage essentially, and then he just kind of painted over it in a similar fashion. Not a lot of variety in terms of colors. It's mostly yellow here, sunset-ish, with a bit of blue accent colors, and a bit of like a nice red here in the bottom. A guy in a robe again. The water is photo bashed, I'm guessing. Right? Oh, no, this one is a bit of everything, right? The guy in the robe. Oh, no birds here, so that's sad. I believe this is some kind of lava, perhaps, although not fully lava. I'd expect more smoke, more yellow, like hot yellow in this image. It's obviously a very interesting environment. I mean, I can see some kind of volcanic rock here. A bit of that color dynamic setting turned on to kind of give that thick look, that kind of palette knife kind of look, while at the same time adding that kind of texture, right? It just makes it look more less digital, I guess. Less digital. Fuck, I need water. Water. And you can tell he did photo bash in some areas, right? And he did layer this pretty well, just because it's the edges of kind of each level or each area is kind of clean, so it doesn't have to kind of go back and forth over painting, you know, like recent paint overs. It's just going to be way more efficient, right? I do like the way he handled the smoke, because usually what I would do is I would use like a cloud brush, just because I'm kind of scared to paint in smoke. I do know John Park does the same thing. He does paint in like the clouds and the smoke. He doesn't have to use like special brushes or anything, like, and you know, kind of turn down the opacity and stuff like that. He just paints it, which is very, very interesting. I like how the reds and the oranges are being reflected on the actual smoke, so it does give that sense of realism, right? Like nothing is out of place. Yeah. Awesome. Now this one does feel a bit like it feels, even though you only have like greens and blues and yellows, it feels like a lot for me. Maybe should have toned down something in the maybe the greens and the blues are too similar, or they're kind of competing too much. Even the fires here, I feel like there's so much competition, and yeah, like something needs to be toned down. I do like the shadows here. It does help you focus more on this area right here, this kind of entranceway. But the fires, maybe it's not the fires. Like something should be toned down, and maybe you can see it. I do like the birds though, because it does add that sense of scale. It makes the environment look bigger, right? Nice blending of his painting and photo bashing skills. Oh, I love this kind of shot. It's very, very dynamic. Usually, it's a 3-point perspective, I would say. And so you can tell it's kind of like a mining kind of community, or hopefully they're being paid. Again, it's in warmer side. You can tell by the oranges here. You can see that color dynamic setting. It has a palette knife look combined with, or even in this kind of shadow area and rocks, right? Combined with his photo bashing techniques. Looks pretty cool. And he obviously had to layer these ropes here. I do think he just kind of painted this along with his photo bashing. I'm not sure. I don't think he did use 3D. I'm only guessing here, but and look at how the accent colors are pretty minimal. The reds and the greens, or the blue greens, or the teal, I guess, and the yellow. So there's not much competition. Like, you know who's the boss. The boss here is the color orange, right? Yeah, maybe he did use 3D. I'm guessing. I don't know. Now this one is obviously painted 2D. No shit. It does look way more oily. Not a lot of cleanliness here. It does actually look like an oil painting, but still you can see that kind of color dynamic setting turned on in some areas to kind of give that palette knife look. Some slight hue variety in the clouds. You can see some purples, some yellows, some greens, coming obviously from the ground below, being reflected on the bottom part of the clouds. Now this one is just it's really just a gray and an orange. Look at how you can see the brush spacing in this one. He didn't even have to like finish the painting in the edges, even though it's kind of clear in terms of like the shape. Like nothing is like the whole canvas is pretty much filled up. He didn't have to go into detail essentially. That's my point. And seeing the color dynamics thing going on here, it looks really cool. And you can tell there's way more detail in this area right here, where there's obviously way more lighting, where there's way more contrast. And I'm guessing he did use like a photo texture for the rocks. He probably reused the same thing again and again. And I used to think like you need to have like like one photo for each area, but you can actually reuse the photo plenty of times. You just have to know how to use the transform setting, learn how to skew it, learn how to warp it, and you'll essentially be fine. And learn how to adjust the levels to kind of make it blend. But yeah, he did add a noise in the end, maybe to kind of signify that ashy kind of look, because it's kind of volcanic, right? The area. Now this one does feel more like a Darek Zabrocki painting, just because of the natural colors here, right? Oh, you can tell. Photo bashing. I'm guessing these are guys in robes. I'm looking at how the clouds were done. I'm guessing this is like one big fucking cloud. And maybe the buildings were done in 3D. I'm guessing. But look at how epic this scene looks, and the clouds do help. You can use clouds in your composition to kind of give that extra kind of epic feel to it. And I do like how the clouds in these areas, especially in the shadow parts, you can see that bit of yellow coming from the rocks, I guess, from this kind of mountainside, right? Pretty cool. I expected to see more greens in the shadow part of these clouds here, but and maybe you can see a bit, but it's so faint. It's kind of hard to see, but you can definitely see some yellows here in the clouds, at least in the shadow areas, right? This piece actually does remind me a bit of Sid Mead and John Park, because both of them often won't. Sometimes they do have dynamic shots, but sometimes they just keep it simple. And they just want to say something quickly, and it helps to not have a very complicated shot. Maybe you just want to show off one aspect, and in this case, I think Rusin Gao wanted to show this kind of structure that's being enveloped by nature, essentially. And of course, guys in, I'm guessing, robes. No birds though, so that's kind of a disappointment there. -1. But it does have a very oily, thick look. Even the clouds again, very thick, very Darek Zabrocki-ish, with a bit of Sid Mead and John Park in him. Oh, this one's actually my favorite, I guess, just because it looks so. The color choice is pretty cool. It's not super complicated. I like the red, pink, orange kind of look in the trees. I guess it's because it's new to me, or it's very he took a simple concept of a tree and then just kind of changed the color of the trunk, right? And I like seeing the red, pink in the clouds as well. And in the clouds, they're actually less shapy. You can actually feel more of the forminess of it. You can see like the puffiness of the clouds, like natural clouds. Like these clouds actually look a bit more realistic and less stylized, right? And I love these rocks right here. They're kind of from an old structure, I guess. Wow. So it does have a bit of storytelling. It's kind of an old ruin, right? So there could be some kind of monolithic structure here that's kind of broken apart. And you're seeing it from the inside. Maybe you're just kind of leaving this environment and you can see like the outside. I don't know, I'm just guessing here. Oh, I can see, guys in robes. Now where are the birds? Oh, no birdies, tweet, motherfucker. And I do like that very gritty kind of look. There's a bit of hue variety, not too much. The hue variety is kind of maintained through the warmness of the tree. It's just a bunch of pinks and oranges and yellows, or not yellows, but purples maybe. And a bit of the bluish thing going on. Not just in the sky, like the light blue in the sky, but also in the actual foliage of the tree, right? And you can tell it's not overdone. You can tell like the boss here is the the trunks, right? Oh, you can even see some of that reds in the structure, in the rocks, right? And he did maintain, or he did leave the blues, the very desaturated blues, to the actual foliage. You can see a bit of it here, here, and he did leave the reds on the, or the pinks rather, in the rocks, right? A bit of blues, I guess, here, bluish thing going on here, but yeah. I could make this the thumbnail for the video, or yeah. If you zoom in, you can actually see that palette knife look with the color dynamic setting turned on, and you can tell photo bashed here. And again, it's hard to see how he did it, or it's hard to see there's hardly any separation of techniques. Like, everything is just well done. It feels cohesive. It's easier on the eyes, and everything just kind of makes sense. And this could actually be a print, essentially, right? So that's it for this art review of Rusin Gao. I do recommend you follow him on ArtStation. Check out the step-by-step stuff, which I've shown you already. Follow him on ArtStation, follow him on Instagram, and do check out the interview he did with the Evil Jar kind of podcast guy. They did have to use a translator, I guess, to translate. No shit. So yeah, thank you for watching. Keep drawing, keep painting, and stay free.